My name is Cavalry. I was a soldier, young back then, riding patrol through Yellowstone in 1918. I thought the worst thing out there was cold nights, hungry bears, or a broken horse, but I was wrong. There was something else in those trees. Bigger, smarter, meaner. I heard it before I saw it. Wood knocks, whistles, heavy footsteps that didn't belong to man or animal, and one night it came close. Close enough to press a hand against the frost on my window. 5 fingers as wide as a shovel. I should have been dead. Miller should have disappeared like the others. But the park let me walk out, and I've been carrying what I saw in that darkness ever since. So before we continue, please make sure to like and subscribe to support the channel and comment down below where you're watching from. Thanks. My name is Miller. I'm a soldier. I know when a story is real because it sits in your stomach like a rock. My grandfather Cavalry wore a campaign hat and had a face like hammered iron, built from toughness. He told me about his terrible night in Yellowstone when I was just a young private, still foolish enough to think ghosts were only bar talk. I'll tell it the way he did. His voice, the smell of tobacco smoke, the scratch of a wool coat, steam rising off the ground, cold biting the bones, and that thing waiting in the dark. I was 20 and full of energy when they sent me to the park. 1918, late summer going into fall. The government was still figuring itself out, swapping nameplates between departments. The Army had run Yellowstone for years. We rode the paths and checked the camps, kept poachers honest and tourists inside the ropes. Headquarters sat at Mammoth Hot Springs at those pale white terraces that looked like bleached bone. They called it Fort Yellowstone. A real post, parade ground, barracks with dry floors. A flag that snapped at first light and came down at last. My days were simple. Saddles, oil, sweat. The leather creaked and horses blew steam. We patrolled to the geysers. We watched Old Faithful like everyone else. The big geyser kept time better than any colonel. You could set your lunch by it. She'd cough once, twice, and then throw a silver spear at the sun. The ground shook just a little. Tourists clapped. We grinned and kept our hands away from the rope line. You don't mess with hot earth. The old sergeants told us that on day 1. The place ran on pressure and promise. Water boiling under your boots, waiting to come up and take a bite. They told us Yellowstone was the first of its kind. A giant piece of God's work set aside for everyone. 3,500 square miles, give or take. Mostly Wyoming with edges in Montana and Idaho. Big sky, cold nights, elk drifting like spilled coffee across the hills. Wolves you heard but didn't see much then. Bison in their heavy coats, heads down like they were pushing the whole world forward. The river cut a canyon that looked like the inside of a sunburnt throat, and it had waterfalls that made your chest tight. The lake sat high and wide, a piece of the moon that fell to earth and never left. It was a good duty station, quiet except when it wasn't. We all felt big and small at the same time. Big because we had the uniform, small because the ground breathed and hissed and could take us without a sound. My first Sergeant Top said, "This place has rules, kid. You keep to the boardwalk. You don't put your boot where the crust looks thin. You do not wander off alone. Bears get the hungry ones. The hot pots get the foolish ones. The river gets the drunk ones. The wind takes the rest." I wrote letters to a girl back in Kansas and told her about the colors. Pools that glowed blue like bottle glass. Orange rings like the halos in stained windows back home. They called one the Grand Prismatic. Looked like somebody spilled a painter's guts right there on the ground. I told her it was all safe if you respected it. That's what I believed. Then the noises started. Then the prints. Then the stories I'd laughed at started climbing out of the dark and sitting beside me when I tried to sleep. I remember the smell of sulfur and pine tar. I remember my horse shifting on cold mornings. I remember thinking I was done with fear. I was wrong. We started hearing things on patrol. Not wolves, not elk calling during mating season. Something else. It was a slap of wood on wood, far off, like someone cracking a big stick against a tree. Once, then again, then waiting. I asked Corporal Hale about it. He shrugged and spit near his boot. Wind, he said, or some ranger banging a stake. We'd see logs rolled out of place near the springs, stacked like a kid tried to build a lean-to and gave up. We'd blame it on tourists or the last storm, but the logs were heavy. You needed 2 men to move them. No footprints around. Not like you'd expect. Just scuffs. Just a hint of something that looked like a heel. Then nothing. Like the ground didn't want to hold it. One evening, near the edge of Hayden Valley, a herd of bison lifted their heads all at once. Every shaggy skull turned toward the tree line. The air went tight. The calves pressed into their mother's ribs. Then the herd moved. No snorts, no thunder, just a heavy wave-like shift like the earth itself slid sideways. We froze and watched them drift across the grass and away from the trees. The smell came next. Dog wet and rotten, like a fur coat left in a ditch. Private Collins said bear under his breath. He sounded like he wanted it to be true. We all wanted that. We had a scout sometimes. A crow man, older than the hills, who came around for day work. He moved like smoke. He knew the park before it had a name in our language. He didn't speak much, not to us, but he'd nod at the places that felt mean and keep his boots on the boards. One morning he looked at the steam rising off the boardwalk near Old Faithful and touched his own chest twice like a man counting heartbeats. "What's that mean?" I asked him later. He said, "Bad guessed." That sat in me like a rock. At night in the barracks, men whispered. Someone had heard distant drums. Someone had found a tree stripped of bark with long-fingered sweeps 6 feet up. Someone saw a shadow, squat and wide, crossing the road at dusk near the lake. No horse, no hat, just a dark man shape. Too tall, too thick, we were soldiers. We made jokes. We said the park had a giant naked tourist who needed a bath. We called it the Hairy Corporal. We laughed because the hair on our own necks was trying to stand up and leave. Old Sergeant Moore told us to shut up. "You boys ain't the first to hear stupid," he said. "The place breathes. The trees bang. The animals do what animals do. Get some sleep and stop spooking the new guys." But even he kept the lamp burning down the hall. The first thing we couldn't explain and couldn't blame on wind happened near the big geyser itself. I was on night watch with Hale. Tourists had left hours ago. The moon sat low and fat. It made the steam glow like ghost lace. We stood by the rope, breath making its own fog. The ground ticked under us like a clock. You could feel Old Faithful was quiet. Then the rocks started, small ones at first, pebbles clicking off the boards behind us. We turned slow because sudden moves spook horses and men alike. Nothing there. Board, steam, the dark line of low buildings where the store workers slept. Something threw a bigger rock. It clacked off the post by my knee. My horse snorted and danced. I caught his reins, whispered, "Quiet." My mouth tasted like metal. "Who's there?" Hale called. "Show yourself." Nothing. Then the smell came back. Wet dog, rot. Something that shouldn't be that strong in the cold air. The steam from the geyser drifted sideways, and I thought for a second I saw a shape in it. Too tall. Shoulders like a bear walking wrong. Then the steam folded, and it was just steam. We checked the buildings. We checked the shed. The door hung crooked. The hinge pins lay in the dirt like two pulled teeth. Inside, sacks of flour split open. White dusty prints scooped into it like handprints, but bigger, wider, as if someone with a spade for a hand grabbed a handful and walked off. We followed flour sprinkles to the boardwalk. Then they just ended, like a story that stops in the middle of a sentence. The night took the rest. We told Top. He heard us out, eyes flat. "Tourist kids," he said, "or a bear with a taste for biscuits. You'll set a watch in pairs and keep your imaginations tied down." We cleaned up. We nailed the door good and proper. We went back to the steam and the ticking earth and the quiet that feels loud. A new private named Ross asked if it was true that a thing in the woods can throw rocks. We told him bears don't throw. He said, "Sure," and didn't sound sure at all. 2 days later, somebody left a fence post shoved into the mud outside the mess hall, upside down, the thick end buried deep. There were no prints. There was a smell. The cook called us worthless and made us dig it out, and it took 3 men to twist it free. We gave all of it to jokes and coffee and the work in our hands. The park didn't care. It waited. Snow came early that year. Not much at first, just dust on saddles and a taste in the air. The phone lines to the outposts sang in the wind. We still rode the paths. We still checked camps. We still walked tourists back from the bright pools when they leaned over too far and didn't hear us the first time. But the woods felt crowded. Not with people, with attention. We followed a report of poaching signs down near the river that cuts its Grand Canyon. We found no campfires, no old cans, no bullet shells. We found a tree with long scratches high up, higher than a man. Bark peeled, sap bleeding. We found a half-chewed elk lying 20 steps from a set of tracks that should have been bare but weren't. The pads were wrong. The toes were human-like. The stride too long. "Hoax," Hale said, voice tight. "Some trapper playing games." "Trappers don't hoax with food," Sergeant Moore said and nudged the elk leg with his boot. That night the wind died. The whole park listened to itself. From the tree line came wood knocks spaced out like code. 1 wait, 2 wait, 3 quick, then nothing. Then a whistle so soft it was more in my teeth than my ears. My stomach went small. We weren't a superstitious group. Not by the rules. But men started carrying a little extra weight. An extra length of rope. Another box of bullets. A charm their grandmother sent in a letter. You could see them pat their pockets and feel better for no good reason. Old Faithful went off late one evening. Not by much. Enough that the rangers scribbled in their little books and frowned. Enough that Top said, "This ground runs hot and cold. Don't go riding a ghost on a clock." We got called to a camp near the lake. A tourist woman in a fine coat said something large had walked between their tents while they slept, and the world went quiet when it did, the way it goes quiet before a storm. Her husband looked like he wanted to leave right then. We checked the sand, wide prints, deep, like someone carried 2 buckets of iron in each hand and left nothing but weight behind. We followed them to the water. They ended at the edge. The lake lapped and told us nothing. The woman asked if it was a bear. Hale said yes because he liked how that answer felt. She nodded like she didn't believe him and packed all the same. Then Private Collins went missing. He'd been sent to the small cabin up by a cut in the pines, not far from the Grand Prismatic. His job was simple. Keep the fire alive. Keep the coffee hot. Send word if he saw smoke on the hills. We rode out when he missed a check-in. The door was open. The coffee had boiled dry. The ceiling above the stove was black with soot. Collins was gone. Not a drop of blood, just a scuff mark by the door like someone slipped or got pulled off balance. Outside, prints. Big ones. Hale bawled too. Human-like and not. One set going toward the trees. None coming back, except for something heavy dragged across a patch of frost where the sun hadn't reached yet. A smear that melted into the needles and vanished like breath. We combed the trees until our throats burned with cold air. No Collins, no coat, no hat. The woods felt thick and watched. The knock started up again, closer, and stopped when we stopped moving. Hale muttered, "Bastards hurting us." And I told him to shut it because saying the thing out loud made it true. Top sent for more men. The phone line went dead. Not cut clean, torn. We found the wire draped in a spruce like laundry. The insulators lay in the mud, cracked. Something had reached up higher than a man with a pole and yanked. Not a bear, not a prank, not some camper with a wild idea. This felt like a hand. We brought in lanterns and rifles and the oldest ranger we had. He said he'd heard stories from the cavalry from years back. Big fella in the timber who hated lantern light and didn't like iron. He laughed when he said it, but the laugh sounded like the end of a prayer. That night we doubled the watch. Men pretended to sleep. The thing that wasn't bear or wind stayed out beyond the fire, breathing. We read the old books. The post had dusty ledgers and journals left by soldiers who were long dead or in the wind. We opened them on the mess table, elbows on old wood, coffee cups sweating. The pages spoke plain. Poachers and wolves, fires and frostbite. Then here and there a note. An odd track. A missing dog. A cabin door forced with no marks from a tool. A shape in steam that the writer swore didn't walk like any man or animal. He knew one entry from the late 1890s. Talked about a hairy man of the high woods. And someone penciled in the margin years later. Same as the story at the lake. Another said not to look it in the eyes because you won't look away. Said it hates bright fire and whistles back if you whistle first. Said it throws rocks and will circle downwind, so if you smell it, you're already behind. We weren't ghost hunters. We were soldiers in a park crew trying to keep order in a place that doesn't care for order. Still, we built a plan because plans give hands something to hold. We set a line near the boardwalk where the ground was solid. Lanterns hung out across the open like small suns. We left sacks of flour and beans inside the shed with the new hinges. We put a bell on the door. We had 2 men high in the dark of the bathhouse roof, another 2 behind the split rail fence. The rest spread along the service road with rifles and stomachs churning. I sat near the shed with Hale and a kid with freckles named Ross, who kept clenching his jaw like he could chew fear down to powder and swallow it. Top stood with us. He had that old, tired look you only see on men who've faced hard nights and kept moving anyway. "We do not shoot shadows," he said. "We do not go chasing, we hold. We make it come to us if it's coming at all. We keep it between the fire and the open." He had a whistle on a cord and a leather sap in his pocket, because he'd worked as a policeman before the war. He didn't say what he thought we'd catch. He didn't need to. The bell chimed just before midnight. Not a clatter, a single ring. The door eased slow, wood complaining even with our grease. Hale sucked in breath. Ross lifted his rifle. The smell hit us. That dog wet rot stronger than ever. My eyes watered. The lantern light seemed to dim. I told myself it didn't. I lied. The door moved again. The bell sent a bright little note that sounded crazy in that cold. Something big filled the gap. Not a bear. The shoulders were wrong. The head sat forward. No neck I could see. Just a slab with hair, a hand. Yes, a hand came around the edge of the door. It wrapped around wood like a child wraps a toy. The fingers were long and thick. Nails black or dirty. Hair down to the knuckles, matted with something that caught light in hard beads. "Now," Top said quietly. "We didn't shoot. You don't shoot at a half-seen shape unless you're ready for the sound to wake the park, and for bullets to hit the wrong thing." We held. The hand pulled. The hinge protested. The bell sang. The shape eased through. The lantern light caught an eye. Not red, not glowing, just an animal eye with knowing in it. Brown with a deep black center that swallowed you up if you let it. The kid Ross made a small sound in his throat. The thing's head turned toward him like a compass needle finds north. It froze. We froze with it. Then it did something simple and terrible. It stepped back out of the light and the night swallowed it whole. "Hold," Top said, but his voice lived far away. We heard the board under its weight creak once, twice, then silence. The bell hung still. The smell drifted away with the steam. The lanterns popped as the wicks took their heat. "Did you see it?" Ross asked. "Too loud." "We all did," I said. "Shut your mouth and keep your eyes open." We waited an hour and it felt like we'd waited a week. Nothing returned. The beans sat in their sacks like bait for a fish too smart to bite. The old ranger on the fence line shook his head like he'd bet wrong on a coin flip he didn't want to win. We didn't learn much. We learned we weren't chasing a bear. We learned it thought and moved like a man who knows he can break your door and take your food and walk away while you hold a gun and do nothing. We learned it didn't like the light but was curious. We learned it could count us. It knew where the eyes were. Top said, "We are not closing this out with a campfire tale and some footprints. We find Collins or what's left. We push it back into the timber and make it pick on rocks and elk instead of men." He didn't say how. No one asked. We all knew plans get thin when the thing on the other end can lift your shed door with one hand. A storm rolled over the ridges 2 nights later. The sky tore and stitched itself shut. Snow came heavy for early fall. The park turned white in hours. The steam off the springs looked thicker, like breath on glass. Sound got weird, closer and farther at once. The phone was still dead. The road out toward Gardner went from bad to a dare. We were alone with our rifles and our horses and the thing that walked like a man and didn't talk like one. We moved to the cabin where Collins had gone missing, set a stove going, hung wet coats along the wall. The windows cried water in the heat. The door had a new bar on it. We took turns dozing and staring at the seams in the boards, listening for breathing that wasn't ours. In the morning, we found prints that came up to the shack and turned away, like a neighbor decided not to knock. Each step lay deep and clean in the new snow. The stride was long. It walked with its feet straight, not toed out like a bear. The hair on my wrist stood up. Hale set his boot next to one print. His foot looked like a child's toy beside it. We followed. We told ourselves we were tracking, not chasing. The print skirted a stand of lodgepole and turned toward a rise where steam lifted off the ground in low curtains. Hot pots nested there like small mouths. I knew the place. Thin soil and bright colors. A place where the park says stand back without saying a word. The trail cut across a patch that any man would avoid. The crust looked solid. The snow made it look like any other meadow. The print stepped light, like the thing knew where to place weight so the cap wouldn't give. We moved slower, poked with poles like old men picking a path through bad ice. The steam wet our faces and the stink of sulfur got so strong it felt like it stuck to my teeth. "Why is it walking here?" Ross asked. Because we can't, Hale said. He was right. It was pushing us away from the trees, and toward the open where it had eyes from every angle we didn't. We found a place where the snow sagged and hissed. Something heavy had gone through here and found safe spots to cross without breaking the skin. I touched the crust with my pole. It went down and didn't come back. The hiss got louder. The ground looked like a quiet mouth right before it bites. We backed off. We had to. The thing knew the park better than we did. It could stand out there on the edge where heat breathes up from the bones of the world and watch us stand on cold, safe ground and grin without lips. The storm cleared by afternoon and left the sky a hard blue. Tracks led on toward a stand of trees near the road. There we found a bit of Collins's scarf caught on a twig. Brown wool, a faint spot that might have been old blood or mud. No body, no hat, no dog tags. We took the scarf because carrying something is better than carrying nothing at all. Back at the post, men started hearing whispers. Not words. The shape of words. A breath that sounded like something trying to be something. More knocks, more whistles. Once a rock hit the roof and slid off, and you could hear it roll across the snow and come to rest near the steps with a thump that felt personal. Top got strict about lights at night. No dark corners, no walks alone. The horses spooked at shadows and sweated like it was July. At chow, nobody wanted the seats by the windows. The kid Ross stopped sleeping. He'd jerk awake with his hands up like someone had dropped him, and he caught himself with his face. Hale started talking to the stove like it was a friend, and the stove didn't mind. We reached for words we didn't like. We said Bigfoot. We said wild man. We said the hairy man. We said booger because the cook said that was what his granny called it down south. We tried on names like we were trying on boots. None fit right. The thing didn't care. It knew the rules. It wrote them. A ranger showed us a dead spruce with twisted branches. Up high, something had woven grass and sticks into a mess of a nest. It smelled like the shack after men had been stuck in it too long with bad socks and wet coats. Hair caught on the bark, long, dark, coarse as old rope. We wrapped it in a handkerchief and gave it to Top, and he put it in a box like evidence in a city cop shop and stared at it, like it could tell him where Collins had gone and whether we'd get him back. That night, it came closer. We heard breath just outside the wall. Slow in and out. The stove snapped, and I flinched so hard my knee hit the table. A hand brushed the window. Not a paw, a hand. 5 shapes, wide and thick, pressed against the frost and left a ghost print. It moved up slow, like someone searching for a loose board. The whole shack leaned under a weight not built from nails and good intentions. Hale aimed at the window, and Top pushed his barrel down and whispered, "Not yet," and the kid Ross made a noise, and I grabbed his collar and held him to the earth. The hand slid away. The breath went with it. Something knocked on the wall 2 times, like a man who wants a door open but isn't sure if he's at the right house. We didn't answer. We breathed out together like men hiding from a patrol in tall grass. When morning came, there were prints circling the shack like a yard of bad prayer beads. Out back where the ground dipped, the snow was punched down and churned like 2 heavy things had danced or wrestled. Or maybe one heavy thing threw itself around in a fit. We found no blood. We found a long piece of bark twisted like someone wrung it like a rag. We found the bell we had hung on the shed door the other night set in the snow in front of the shack, tied to a rib of elk, like a gift or a joke. No one laughed. We had no help coming. The line was still dead. Horses were nearly useless in deep drifts. Everything tight and the world snapped one more notch. We decided to push it. Not out of bravery. Out of the way fear sits in you until you need to move or go crazy. We took 4 men, Top, me, Hale, Ross. We carried rope, lanterns, rifles. We took the box with the hair. Don't ask me why. Maybe we wanted the smell to remind us we weren't dreaming. We headed for the canyon because the tracks went that way and because the sound of the falls, day or night, makes a kind of song that covers the small noises your heart makes when it's trying to get out. The air there felt colder, like the river stole heat out of you to pay the debt of all that falling. The snow lay heavy on the stone guardrails like old men's shoulders. The canyon's walls dropped away, orange and yellow and iron red. The river at the bottom chewing and chewing, never full. The sky was clean blue and steam from far springs drifted like lost banners across the trees. We found fresh prints. They led to the brink trail and down, I didn't like it. You don't chase a man or a thing where the ground tilts and the sound is so big you can't hear a shout if you need to. But we were past liking. We moved slow. We set our feet carefully. The lanterns hissed because the wind took their edges. Snow squeaked under our boots. Our breath smoked and got torn away by the fall's voice. Halfway down on a flat where tourists like to stand and pretend they aren't scared, we smelled it. That bad wet fur, strong, it sat on my tongue. We stopped and the world stopped with us. The kid Ross whispered, "Do you hear that?" We all did. Not the falls, not the wind. A rhythm, knocks, 1-1-1-2. Farther down, answered by another. Up and back in the trees, 1-1-2. The things were talking or calling or counting us. Lanterns up, Top said, and we made a wall of small fire and thin courage. It stepped out onto the trail 20 steps down, right where the spray from the falls dusts the air with ice when it's cold enough. The hair hung wet and thick. It was tall as hell. Shoulders like barrels turned on their sides, legs like posts. The face was not a monkey face. It was a face you'd know if you were drunk and had been hit in the head and woke up in a church, where all the saints' pictures had been melted with a candle. A man's map laid wrong and too wide. The mouth tight. The eyes deep and flat and smart. It didn't roar. It didn't beat its chest. It looked at our lights and blinked slow. Its breath made smoke. It stepped forward easy, like a big dog that knows you don't want to shoot it. It lifted one hand. It curled the fingers to show how big they were or how much it could take from us and keep if it wanted. Back, Top said quietly, because shouting felt like a waste in that big noise.
Slow, keep the lanterns up.
Don't look it in the eyes. I looked in the eyes. I couldn't help it. They were brown and not. They had something in them I've seen in men who came back from bad fights and forgot how to sleep. Tired, old, done with being chased, done with being hungry, ready to end something. It moved quick. Quicker than a thing that size should. One step, then two. Hand out like it meant to push our lights aside and walk through us like brush. Hale fired. He shouldn't have, but he did. And the sound hit the canyon and came back and smacked our ears and the lanterns fluttered like birds. The slug caught the thing high in the shoulder. It rocked. It didn't fall. It made a sound that wasn't a scream and wasn't a growl. It was like the first cough out of a deep throat in a cold room. It took another step. Top threw the hair. Stupid, right? But he did. He yanked the box open and grabbed that matted rope of stinking dark and threw it like a man throws a snake he doesn't want. The hair hit the thing in the chest and stuck to wet fur. It froze. It looked down. It made a small sound, smaller than I thought it had in it. It took a step back. Hale fired again. Missed. The kid Ross raised his rifle and his hand shook so hard the muzzle wagged like a reed in wind. I took my shot and the lantern flared with the muzzle flash, and the slug went low into the thigh and the thing staggered and put a hand on the stone rail to steady itself, and the stones that had been there since some poor guy carried them up from the river cracked under that hand. Back, Top said louder. Back now. We moved. It came. The trail went narrow and a spray of ice lay across a step where the water's breath froze itself into a trap. The thing hit that slick. It went down to a knee in one hand. The rail, old and tired, gave. Stone went into the canyon. The sound it made when it shattered below came late and long. The thing grabbed the remaining stones, and the whole trail moaned like a ship in a bad sea. I don't know if it fell because of us, because of the shot to the leg, because the rail quit, because the park wanted it, because God did, or because nothing cares. I saw it drop. I saw a hand, then an arm, then hair and muscle and weight and dark, and then spray and white and a freezing cold wind in my face like a slap from a dead man. It didn't go all the way. It caught something. A root or some hidden ledge. I went to the edge because I am dumb and brave in equal measure. I saw it below us, not far, clinging with one hand, chest heaving, eyes up on me. Not on the drop. At me. Hale yelled at me, and I don't know what he said. Ross was sobbing into his coat. Top whispered some prayer word and didn't finish it. It looked at me. Not past me, at me. I saw the hurt. I saw the cold. I saw something else. Maybe the part of a man that wants to be left alone. Maybe the part of an animal that knows an animal when it sees one. I did the worst thing I could. I reached out. I couldn't touch it. The space between us was nothing and everything. I reached like an idiot trying to grab a hat that blew off a table, My hand hung in steam. The thing bared its teeth but didn't hiss. Then the ledge it held crumbled and it fell. No scream, no thrash, just gone into white, and the river's voice swallowed it whole and sent back nothing. A dark shape tumbled once in the spray, and I lost it. We stood there a long time because that's what you do when the world does something huge in front of you, and you're too small to answer back. Then we climbed slow, lanterns sputtering, fingers numb, our breaths like smoke from tired engines. We didn't talk until the falls were behind us and the ground stopped leaning. We went back to the shack and sat around the stove, faces red from the heat, backs iced from the draft. Hale stared at his hands like he borrowed them and didn't know how to return them. Ross slept with his eyes half open and twitched at noises that didn't happen. Top took the box the hair came in and put it in the fire. It burned slow and ugly. The smell was its own kind of hurt. He kept the lid. He turned it over in his hands like a man who wants something to hold. And the thing he wants is gone. In the morning, a new snow covered our tracks, and the broken stones on the brink waited on spring to show themselves again. We looked for a body. Men want bodies. We want to bury something or burn it or wrap it and send it home. The river took what it wanted. We found hair in a snag and a smear brown like old coffee on a hidden rock near the waterline and nothing else. The line to Gardner came back 2 days later. The post got a call from a man with a fresh badge from the new service that was taking over the park from us. He sounded young on the wire. He asked about the missing private. He asked if we had bear trouble. Top said we were handling it. The young man said to keep it tidy for the handoff. Top said sure in a tone that meant nothing and everything. We wrote Collins up as missing, presumed dead. The paper said he likely slipped and fell into hot ground or chilled water. That happens. The park takes men who stop watching. We boxed his things. A book, a comb, a letter he never sent to his sister in Iowa. We sealed it with twine that knew too much. We didn't write down the big hand on the window. We didn't put the hair in the ledger because it burned to ash and the ashes drifted up the chimney into a sky that forgets. We didn't mention the conversation of Knox by the brink or the way the thing looked at me like a man looks at a mirror when he's tired of his own face. We said we'd move on because that is what uniforms to the park changed over that year. The Army gave way to the new service with their round badges and fresh coats. They were good folks mostly. They learned the same rules we did. The boardwalk keeps you alive. The water will take you quick. The bison own the road. The ground breathes. They heard the knocks too. Some of them. I heard that later when I went back, old and stupid, just to see if my boots could find the same dirt. A ranger in a green hat told me about a fisherman who went missing near the lake, and footprints they didn't like in the mud. He laughed it off in the telling, the way men do when they don't want their words to stick. I don't laugh much. Not on this. I saw something. I helped put bullets into it and watched it fall into a place that eats everything and never gets full. I don't feel proud or brave. I feel small. I feel like I put my hand out to a thing that might have taken it and pulled and ended me easy as anything. And it didn't. It just looked at me like I was part of its long bad day. Years later, when war came big and loud across the ocean, I stood in mud with a rifle and men on either side and thought about the breath on the shack wall and the hand on the frost. I thought about how fear feels the same no matter what shape it wears. We pushed through those days because men beside us were pushing too. Same as in the park, same as always. You want a lesson from me? Here it is. The world's big, bigger than your piece of it. There are places where rules bend, where the ground has a voice and things that don't fit in neat boxes still have to eat and sleep and keep warm and move through their lives. If you go there, don't go cocky. Go quiet, keep your eyes open. Keep your hands steady. Respect the line between your boot and the place where steam comes up and says no more. Sometimes at night I wake up, and I'm back on that trail by the falls. My lamp hisses. The spray hits my cheek like cold fingers. I hear the knocks. 1112. I see the eyes. The old tired look. I reach because I'm a fool. The thing falls again. It always falls. And the river keeps the rest. My grandson asked me once if I think it lived. I said maybe. The park is full of places to lie up and heal. Hot holes, thick timber, miles and miles for a thing to disappear into. Maybe it pulled itself along the rocks like a wounded bull and licked its hurts and learned something. Knew about men and lights and rails and the waystone breaks. Sometimes I smell that bad dog stink on the wind when I'm standing by a campfire and the wood pops and spits. I know it's just memory, that rotten animal scent here in my head, but I listen anyway. I listen for a knock that answers back from the dark where the trees hang together like men with secrets. If I hear it, I don't whistle. I let it talk to itself. I keep the fire up. I keep my back to something solid. I say a small word in my mouth not to chase ghosts off, but to remind myself I'm still here. Yellowstone will kill you if you're foolish. It'll save you if you're lucky. It'll show you colors you don't have names for. It sits on old heat and sleeps light, the old man said. The ground there is a lid on a pot that's been boiling since the world learned how. That feels right. There's pressure. There's breath. There are things that walk the edges because that's where life keeps them. I never saw it again. I've had winters where I wanted to, summers where I prayed not to. I don't tell this for fun. I tell it because a kid in a uniform asked me what's true, and I owe the truth when I can give it. I tell it because a private named Collins went missing on a cold morning near a bright pool, and men should be remembered even when the body doesn't make it home. I tell it because the park keeps its own books, and a story told out loud is a way to pin a page under glass for a while. If you go there, walk soft. Keep your hands where you can see them. Don't throw rocks unless you want an answer. And when the geyser coughs and throws its silver spear up through the cold blue, clap if you want. It doesn't care. It'll keep time whether you count or not. One more thing before I shut my mouth and let the wood settle. When you feel watched out there, you are. Sometimes it's a ranger. Sometimes a wolf you won't see. Sometimes a big man in a fur coat that's his own skin. Standing just past the steam, smelling like rain and rot, waiting for you to make the wrong step. He can wait longer than you. He's got all the time there ever was in that place. And when he knocks, 112, don't knock back. I kept the scarf fragment from Collins. I kept the stone from the brink where the rail broke. I kept the lid from the box we burned. On quiet nights, I set them on the table and stare, and let the lamp hiss and think about the hand on the glass. Then I put them away and sleep. And sometimes I don't dream of falling, that's all of it. That's as true as I can make it. We were soldiers. We stood our posts. The park breathed. The big fella moved through our little square of time and kept going. And somewhere down in the cold roar where the river turns everything to one long hungry sound, there's a piece of him. Or there's nothing at all. Either way, the water keeps moving. Either way, the steam rises. Either way, men tell stories and hold their hands out to things that will never take them. You wanted the real bit. That's it. The rest is just the wind in the pines and a smell on a bad night that says you are not alone. Not here, not ever. Not in that wide old park with its hot breaths and its cold teeth and its colors like stained glass set right into the earth. Keep your fire bright. Keep your boots dry. Don't answer the knocks. And if you hear a bell ring once in the dark, do not open the door. So that's the end of our video. If you made it this far, make sure to hit like and subscribe. It really helps the channel and it's free. And if you want more terrifying encounters like this one, check out the other videos on screen right now. Thanks for watching and stay safe out there. See you soon.